Every other parent in Seoul returned her calls within the hour. The Cha family let her message sit for 3 days, then sent a man who made the air in her classroom go thin. Elena hadn't expected anyone at all by 7 that evening. She'd stayed to grade essays under the buzzing lights, Min-jun's blank page on top of the stack. A boy who used to write like he had something burning in him, now turning in nothing. She was rehearsing what to say to a guardian who clearly didn't care when the door opened without a knock. The man who stepped in didn't fill the room so much as still it. Tall, unhurried, in a charcoal coat that probably cost more than her year's salary. He smelled faintly of cold citrus and leather, something expensive and clean. His eyes found her and stayed, and for a moment, Elena forgot the speech entirely. "You called about my brother," he said. Not a question. "You're Min-jun's guardian?" She stood, smoothing her cardigan, annoyed at herself for the nervous gesture. "You're a little young to be his father." "I'm his brother, Cha Do-yoon." He didn't offer a hand. He simply looked at her the way other people read a contract, slowly, missing nothing. Most people, Elena would learn later, dropped their gaze when he did that. She didn't. She was too irritated. "Then maybe you can explain why a brilliant 16-year-old has stopped doing his work and won't speak in class," she said. "I've left 3 messages. He needs someone paying attention, and instead I get silence and then—" She gestured at him. "This! Dramatic entrance at 7 p.m. Something shifted in his face. Not anger, closer to surprise, as if a familiar machine had produced an unfamiliar sound. "You're not afraid of me," he said. "Should I be? You're 40 minutes late and you skipped the knock." She crossed her arms. "Min-jun's the one I'm worried about. Sit, or don't, but I'm not letting him fail because the adults in his life are busy." For a long moment, Do-yoon said nothing. He took in the chalk dust on her sleeve, the cold coffee, the stack of essays she'd graded for kids who weren't his. People feared him for a living. This small, sharp-tongued woman with the warm brown skin and the tired eyes was scolding him in a borrowed cardigan, and he could not, for reasons he didn't examine, make himself leave. "Tell me," he said quietly, pulling out the chair across from her desk. "Everything about my brother." Elena blinked, thrown by the sudden compliance. She sat too. She talked for 20 minutes. He listened to every word, though by the time she finished, Do-yoon could not have said much about Min-jun's grades. He could have described, precisely, the exact shade of her eyes when she got angry. That, he decided, was a problem. 3 days later, a car she didn't recognize was waiting outside the academy gates, and the driver knew her name before she gave it. "Mr. Cha would like to discuss Min-jun's progress," the man said, holding the door. "He apologizes for the short notice." Elena stood on the curb, bag clutched to her chest. Every sensible instinct told her to decline. She got in anyway. For the boy, she told herself. Only for the boy. And the car carried her to a quiet restaurant with no sign out front, where Do-yoon was already seated at the single table in an empty room. "You bought out a restaurant to talk about homework," she said, sitting. "I bought privacy." He poured her tea before she could reach for it. "You said he needs attention. I'm giving it." What followed was the strangest dinner of her life. He asked real questions. What Min-jun read, what made him go quiet, whether he had friends. But between the questions, Elena kept catching him watching her hands, her mouth, the way she tucked a curl behind her ear. When the waiter lingered too close to her chair, Do-yoon said something low in Korean, and the man retreated like he'd touched a live wire. "You didn't have to scare him," Elena said. "He was crowding you." "He was pouring water." "He was crowding you." Do-yoon said it the same way both times, perfectly calm, as if she simply hadn't heard him correctly the first time. It should have unsettled her. Instead, something warm moved through her chest, and she hated that it did. These dinners became a pattern. He'd send the car, she'd tell herself no, and climb in anyway. He learned she took her coffee bitter, that she'd grown up between two countries and belonged fully to neither, that she defended her students like a woman with something to prove. He started having her favorite tea waiting before she arrived. When she mentioned, once, offhand, that the walk from the bus stop was poorly lit, the street had new lights within a week. She noticed. She didn't ask how. Asking felt like stepping off a ledge. The night it changed, rain caught them leaving. She'd forgotten an umbrella, and he held his over her, his arm a careful arc that didn't quite touch. "Why me?" she said suddenly, looking up at him. "You could have any sophisticated woman in this city. I grade papers and yell at you." "That's why." He turned to face her under the narrow shelter of the umbrella, close now, the rain a curtain around them. "Everyone in my life performs. You scolded me in a cardigan." "Romantic," she breathed, but she didn't step back. He lifted his free hand, slow enough that she could have stopped him, and brushed his thumb along her jaw. When he kissed her, it was unhurried and certain, like a man who'd already decided and was simply informing her of it. Elena gripped his lapel and kissed him back. She found out who he was from a newspaper of all things. His face behind a headline about a prosecutor's case collapsing, the words Cha family and organized crime sitting beside the mouth that had kissed her 2 nights ago. Elena set the paper down very carefully, as if it might go off. She didn't take the car that evening. She walked, fast, heart loud, and made it 4 blocks before the familiar black sedan slid to the curb beside her and the window came down. "Get in," Do-yoon said. "Please." "You lied to me." "I never lied. You didn't ask." He opened the door from inside. "Elena, get in the car before I follow you home on foot, because I will." She got in. She told herself it was the cold. He took her to the high-glass apartment she'd never seen, and there, with the city glittering below them, she finally said it. "You're a criminal. You're—" She gestured helplessly. "That. The thing the newspapers are afraid to name." "I'm the head of my family," he said. "I inherited it the day my father died and Min-jun became mine to raise. I don't get to give it back." He stepped closer. "Ask me what you really want to ask." "Have you hurt people?" "I've protected what's mine. I've never enjoyed it." He didn't flinch from the question, and somehow that steadied her more than a denial would have. "And I have never once lied to you, which is more than the men who grade papers beside you can say." She should have left. She rehearsed leaving. But he was looking at her like she was the only fixed point in a moving world, and when she thought about not seeing him again, the idea simply refused to fit in her chest. "There was a man," he said quietly, "who'd been bothering your landlord, threatening the building over money. I made it stop. No one was harmed. I need you to know I can keep you safe, that whatever you decide about me, you're already safe. That part isn't conditional." "You looked into my landlord?" She should have been frightened. Mostly she felt absurdly seen. "I look into everything that touches you." He said it like an apology and a vow at once. "I know it's too much. I don't know how to be less." "Then don't lie to me. Ever. That's my one rule." She closed the distance herself this time, fisting her hands in his shirt. "Break it and I'm gone. Money and cars and lights be damned." "Never." he said against her mouth. And then he was kissing her like the word wasn't enough, his hands framing her face, walking her back until she met the cool glass with the whole city spread beneath them. She wound her arms around his neck. He kissed the corner of her jaw, the curve of her throat, slow and reverent, murmuring her name like he'd waited his whole life to say it. For once, Elena stopped arguing. The woman was waiting in Elena's classroom after hours, seated at a student's desk like she owned the deed to it, and she smiled as though they were already friends. "You must be Elena," she said in flawless English. "I'm Han Yeji. Do-yoon and I are to be married. Has he not mentioned me?" Elena's stomach dropped, but she kept her face still. "He hasn't." "No, he wouldn't. He's sentimental about distractions before the wedding." Yeji rose, elegant in a way that made Elena conscious of her chalk-dusted sleeves. She set a photograph on the desk. Do-yoon and Yeji, younger, his arm around her, both families arranged behind them like a treaty. "Our fathers arranged it years ago. The Han and Cha families joined. He knows his duty. He always comes back to it." She tilted her head, almost kind. "You're lovely, but you teach his brother. When this is done, you'll still have that. Don't make it ugly." She left Elena standing there with the photograph and a hairline crack running through everything. Elena tried that night to be reasonable. She asked him plainly, but the question came out wrong, wounded, accusing, and Do-yoon, who had spent his life giving nothing away, went still and guarded at exactly the wrong moment, his jaw tightening before he said, carefully, "Yeji is complicated. Our families have history. Let me handle it." Let me handle it. Not, she's no one. Not, there's no wedding. To Elena, raw and braced for the floor to fall out, it sounded like confirmation. "History," she repeated. "That's the word you're choosing." "Elena, were you ever going to tell me there was a woman who thinks she's marrying you?" Her voice cracked. "I have one rule. One. Don't lie. And lying by leaving things out still counts." "I'm not." He reached for her and she stepped back, and the flicker of pain on his face would have stopped her if she'd been able to see past her own. "I'm not a distraction before someone's wedding," she said. "I won't be that. I can't." She walked out. He didn't chase her, not because he didn't want to, but because for one fatal moment the head of the Cha family didn't know how to fight something he couldn't put his hands on, and the hesitation cost him the door closing. What Elena didn't know, walking home through the cold with her arms wrapped around herself, there was no engagement. There never had been. Yeji had wanted it for years, had built her whole future on a promise their fathers floated, and Do-yoon had refused at 19. The photograph was from a New Year's dinner. The treaty was a fantasy she'd dressed as fact. And Do-yoon, alone in the glass apartment with an untouched glass of water, was already pulling apart the evening thread by thread. Who got to her? Who said the word wedding? His calm curdling into something colder and far more focused. By morning, he had Yeji's name. The text came from Elena's own phone, so Do-yoon almost believed it. "I need space. Don't look for me." Until he noticed she'd never once called him by his full name, and the message did. He was already moving before the thought finished. Elena, meanwhile, had been walking to the bus when a car slowed and two polite, terrible strangers said her name and the word Do-yoon in the same breath, and she'd hesitated half a second too long. Now she sat in a cold storage office on the edge of the city, wrists unbound but the door very much locked, across from Han Ye-ji, who was pacing in heels and losing the elegant calm thread by thread. "This isn't what I wanted," Ye-ji said, more to herself than Elena. "You were supposed to leave. You were supposed to be sensible and leave." "You staged a wedding that doesn't exist," Elena said. Fear sat in her chest, but anger sat on top of it. "He never agreed to marry you, did he? You made it up." "He would have, eventually, before you," Yeji's voice climbed. "I just needed him to remember what he owed. And now he'll come here, and he'll choose, and—" "He'll choose," Elena agreed quietly. "Just not the way you think." The door opened. Do-yoon didn't shout. That was the part Elena would remember, that he came in silent and unhurried, and the two men by the wall went pale and stepped back without being told, because some debts get called in by a name alone. He crossed the room, eyes only for Elena, and crouched to her level, scanning her face, her wrists, cataloging her in one sweep. "Are you hurt?" he said. "Just that." "No." Her voice shook. "Do-yoon." "I know. I know everything now." He took off his coat and put it around her shoulders, then finally turned to Yeji, and his voice didn't rise even slightly. "You took her. Do you understand what you've done? Not to me, to yourself. Your father will hear it from me before noon. Every door you have in this city is already closing." He said it the way other men say the time. "You will not see her again. You will not see me. You exist outside everything I touch, starting now." Yeji opened her mouth and found nothing in it. He helped Elena up, kept his arm around her the whole way out, and not one person stopped them. In the car, the cold finally hit her, and she started to shake, and he pulled her across the seat into him and held her like he could press the fear out of her body with his own. "There was never a wedding," he said into her hair. "I refused it at 19. You are not a distraction. You are the only thing I've ever chosen for myself." His voice broke on it, the unbreakable man breaking. "I should have said it plainly. I'll never not say it plainly again. Forgive me." She kissed him, wet-cheeked and furious, and his. "Take me home," she whispered. He did. Spring came to Seoul the way good things came to Elena now. Gradually, and then all at once. 6 months had passed since the cold storage office. Yeji was gone, not in any frightening sense, but in the way a closed account is gone. Her father had pulled the family back to Busan within the week. The imagined treaty dissolved, the photograph and the fantasy with it. Elena never saw her again. Some endings don't need a body to be final. They just need a door that stays shut. Min-jun was the first miracle. The boy who'd turned in blank pages now stayed after class because he wanted to, not because he was failing, arguing with Elena about whether the poet meant the sea or meant death, and grinning when she conceded a point. He'd started writing again. The burning thing was back in him. One afternoon he called her Nuna without thinking, then went red to the ears, and Elena had to turn to the whiteboard so he wouldn't see her face crumple with how much it meant. "He likes you more than he likes me," Do-yoon said that evening, watching her grade at the kitchen island of the glass apartment that had, somewhere along the way, become theirs. Her books had colonized his shelves. Her bitter coffee lived in his cupboard. "Everyone likes me more than they like you," she said. "You're an acquired taste." "You acquired it." He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, set his chin on her shoulder. He still looked into everything that touched her. She'd stopped pretending that would change. But he told her now, plainly, all of it, every time. The one rule held. He'd never broken it again. "I've been thinking," he murmured against her temple, and she felt him go uncharacteristically nervous. The feared head of the Cha family, suddenly 25 and unsure. About plainly saying things. He turned her on the stool to face him. He didn't kneel, that wasn't him, but he took both her hands in both of his, and that was more from him. "Marry me. Not a treaty, not an arrangement. The one thing I've ever chosen, choosing you out loud, in front of everyone, for the rest of it." His thumb moved over her knuckles. "I know what I am. I'm asking anyway." Elena looked at this dangerous, unguarded man who had bought streetlights so she could walk home safe, who said her name like a vow, who had broken open in the back of a car and never closed again. "You're an acquired taste," she said, eyes wet, smiling. "And I'm keeping you." "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes, Do-yoon." He kissed her then, slow and certain, and grinning against her mouth, lifting her off the stool so her feet left the floor, the whole bright city spread out beneath them, and not a single shadow left in it. Down the hall, Min-jun pretended very hard not to be watching, and smiled at his book. They were home. All of them. For good.